Okay, so we're right in the middle of this massive and, some would argue pretty dangerous shift in how science actually gets done. It's a story about this incredible flood of information, the powerful and kind of scary tools we've built to handle it, and a question that really cuts to the very heart of the scientific method itself.
To really get a sense of the scale of this change, just look at this. It's a tale of two papers. On the left, you've got Watson and Crick's 1953 paper on DNA. This is arguably the most important paper in biomedical science, period. And get this, it was published with almost zero original data. Now look at the right. This is from a single recent cancer study. We're talking whole exome sequencing for over 500 patients, transcriptome sequencing for another 400. It's just an absolute avalanche of data. This right here is the data deluge. So this flood of data, it really changes everything. And right at the center of this whole story is the scientific investigator. And as the world of data transforms, maybe we need a new way to think about what their role even is. Let's try framing them as the protagonist of this scientific movie, the investigator as auteur.
Now that word, auteur, it actually comes from filmmaking. It's what people use to describe a director, think Wes Anderson or Alfred Hitchcock, someone who isn't just, managing the project. No, they are the central creative force. Their vision shapes every single frame and makes the final film a complete, unified work of art.
So the question is, could a scientist be an auteur? Well, in the traditional sense, absolutely. That was the whole idea. The investigator was the visionary, they came up with the project, they obsessed over all the biomedical details, they understood all the little nuances, and they were responsible for the entire coherent story that came out of the data.
But here's the tension. The old way, that was the auteur model. You had a single mind, or a pretty small team, that was deeply connected to every single part of the process. But this data deluge has forced a totally new model, the big team. Now you've got all these siloed specialists in things like bioinformatics and statistics who are crunching the numbers, but they might not have that deep foundational knowledge of the subject. And in that kind of setup, there's often no single person who understands the entire project from start to finish.
And that kind of fragmentation, well, it leads us right to the central conflict of this new era. It's a philosophical battle, really, between transparent, reviewable science on one side and the powerful, but often totally opaque, tools we now use for analysis on the other.
And look, the results that come out of this new model, they are undeniably compelling. Modern data analysis gives us these beautiful, stunningly complex images, like the network chart you see here. It looks so authoritative, so intricate, and exciting. But here is the massive problem. The journey from that raw patient data all the way to a polished image like this one is often a complete mystery. How did we get there? The analytical process with all its complex stats and AI algorithms, it's basically a black box, even to the very scientists who came up with the study in the first place.
And that's a huge deal. As author David Kaplan puts it, an analytical modality that is obscure and consequently unreviewable is inconsistent with the scientific method. It goes against the entire foundation of science, which is built on transparency and skepticism.
So why is it a black box? Well, for one, the algorithms that power this AI are almost never published. They're often proprietary. Literally, they're trade secrets. They're written in arcane computer code with all these hidden assumptions and trade-offs that make it impossible for another scientist to really understand, let alone replicate. And this leads to a really powerful and honestly a deeply provocative conclusion. When scientists have to simply believe that these unreviewable tools are correct, that reliance on hidden mechanics starts to feel a whole lot less like science, and a lot more like an act of faith. It gives it a faith-based hue, a religious tint, that is, as Kaplan says, anathema to science. Okay, so to understand why this is even happening, we have to look at the stakes. We have to examine the real-world career pressures and the incentives that shape modern research, what you might call the currency of science.
For decades, there's been a pretty clear transactional system in place. Step 1, an investigator produces really valuable, original data. Step 2, they analyze that data to get some insights. Step 3, they publish those insights in top journals. And Step 4, those publications get exchanged for the things that keep a career going: funding, promotion, prestige.
In this old system, the original data is everything. It's the fuel for the whole engine. Its value basically sets the ceiling for the value of the entire project. And that has been an incredibly powerful incentive for investigators to be completely obsessed with the quality of their data because, hey, their careers literally depend on it.
So what happens when that entire system gets turned on its head? What happens when the data becomes so massive that no single person can actually review it anymore? Well, the focus shifts. The original data, the fuel, it starts to get devalued.
and the sophisticated, arcane analysis becomes the real star of the show.
So as we barrel into this new paradigm, it forces us to ask a really critical question. In this constant rush for more data, more analysis, more power, what are we losing in the process?
We risk losing the most human and maybe the most important parts of discovery. When an investigator can no longer scan their own data, they lose that intimate, intuitive connection. They lose the ability to spot those weird little aberrations, the outliers that might just signal a huge error or maybe hint at a world-changing breakthrough. We lose the chance for their creativity and their intuition to connect with the raw results, that incredible, almost magical synergy between human expertise and the data itself.
Which brings us to this final, really unsettling question that sits at the heart of this entire shift. Is it possible that the relentless pursuit of more and more data, analyzed by machines that we don't fully understand, could actually lead to less true scientific understanding?
At the end of the day, the goal isn't just to produce more data. It's to actually understand it. As we charge into this new scientific frontier, developing a more mature, more critical perspective on our data and our tools is probably the most important challenge of all. It's about making sure that as our incredible capabilities grow, so does our wisdom. Because in the end, science can't be built on faith alone.